Good afternoon, everyone joining live. If you're joining live or if you're watching the replay, welcome. I'm Nancy Berger. This is the Ask Nancy live stream. I do this every couple of weeks and discuss issues that may be under your skin, that are under mine. Today, I am joined by my good friend and colleague, Suzanne McColl. She is a therapist and a thought leader in this space. We sort of started following each other on LinkedIn years ago and just like each other's content. And this is a topic, imposter syndrome, that is near and dear to both of us. So welcome, Suzanne. Tell our audience a little bit about what you do and your practice.
Thank you, Nancy. It's great to be here. I love just any conversation with you. We speak the same language.
Yes. Yes.
Well, so I'm a therapist and I've been a therapist for a long time, but I've decided that I wanted to try to get out and reach more people in a different way. So I started really trying to educate people about basically what does it mean to be human and what do we do with our emotions? How do we be an emotional person and like go to work, right? And navigate everything that all the expectations are and still be a person, still bring yourself to work, which I think is
there's no different, right? This work-life idea, I just don't buy it. We go to work, we are who we are.
Yeah.
Now, of course, do you filter differently your comments? Perhaps, then you may speak differently at work than you will with your partner at home. Okay, yes, of course. But that's window dressing. I'm talking about we're the person we are. And we go to work and we behave the way we behave, and then we go home. And so this idea of guiding people on human skills, the ripple effects are huge, right?
Yeah.
Because it translates into how you run your relationships.
Right. And just if people have more understanding of that, they can like kind of observe themselves. They can observe other people and like understanding, for example, there's a lot more people in the room than just the two of you, right? As a therapist, we all know your parents might be here. Your teacher from 8th grade might be here. The kids in the playground, whatever.
Yeah.
And so knowing that we have reactions to things, interactions trigger kind of reactions, emotional reactions, and they're not always rational. And so trying to slow it down.
I think rarely are they like, that's a really good point you raised. And I want to contextualize it a little bit for our audience. So, and correct me if I'm wrong, because you're the pro in the room.
Yeah, go ahead.
But the cognitive brain, the logical brain, is a certain group of pathways. But when our parasympathetic nervous system gets triggered because somebody says something that brings us right back to the playground, right?
Yeah.
Then we don't think with our logical brain in those moments, or we think it's not as prominent as our, reptilian or, the fight or flight response in the amygdala, whatever it is. But people don't really understand that because why? Well, because our brain is working and we're in it. We can't exactly say, I wonder which neural pathway is getting triggered. It's just not the way we are. But I think, to your point, if we can get in the habit of noticing ourselves instead of judging or buying into every thought we have, we can create a different experience for ourselves.
Yeah. And it's interesting. The other thing you said earlier was like, these are topics that get under your skin, right? Yeah. That's another way. If we tune into our body and how our body feels when something's going on, it tells you that you might be having a reaction. No, you might be something that someone said to you might make you very anxious. Like your body starts to get very anxious.
Right. And know the signals, right?
Yeah, you have to know those.
Right. Like I'm feeling it in my stomach right now, or my mouth is getting dry, or I'm getting that kind of weird sweat, or like something's happening that's like a visceral kind of reaction, and noticing it and like taking note. Oh, so then you can say, oh, that thing is happening. And then you can kind of like connect dots. Like, why is that thing happening? It can be so liberating.
Yeah. Yeah,
but
it is.
Not everybody knows how to do it. So you teach people how to do that.
Yeah, that's what I try to help people be able to do. And it's really, a lot of it has to do with slowing down. We always think that we have to give a response right away.
Yeah, thank you. I mean, yes, take a beat.
Take a breath.
Take it. Right.
And even talk out loud, say, you know what, let's slow this down a little bit.
Right.
This is what we have on the table here. And I know you want me to do this. Just talk it out. Because when you start to talk it out, that's when you get out of your fight or flight.
That's a great, great tip. Using, right? Because you're finding language, you're articulating, you're using your, both sides of your brain. That's such a great tip. Speak it out, even if you're in an uncomfortable exchange and you say, okay, what I'm hearing you say is this. How can we, it doesn't have to be that there's an answer or you're necessarily responding. You could parrot what the other person said to validate them and then use that as a springboard for conversation.
Exactly. Discussion. And it helps you slow down. But the science, I've been so excited about this aspect of things, is when you slow down and you feel calmer, the mirror neurons help the other person feel calmer.
Yes. Explain the mirror neurons, because our audience might not understand that. That's so fascinating.
It's so fascinating. And I'm not going to give you a real highly technical explanation, but what it has to do with is when you are in a certain state, like anxious or calm, there's a lot of certain neurons get firing, neurons. Yeah. So when that happens, the neurons start to support whatever that state is. So anxiety or calmness. And just by being in the same presence and looking at somebody, you are communicating that state through unspoken language. Cues, and their neurons start to kick in the same pattern that yours are. So they start to get calm also. Or you could also make them more anxious.
We don't really, the human creature is an amazing machine. The more we learn, the more we realize how little we know about what really goes on in our
fascinating.
Neurology. It is fascinating.
Yeah.
So now let's talk about imposter syndrome specifically, because I know you speak about this a lot. So do I. And I think it's important to identify what it is and what it isn't. It isn't a diagnosis. It's a syndrome. It's a continuum.
It's a continuum.
Right. So one day you could feel imposter syndrome could get triggered. And by the way, I don't know, I haven't accessed this study and read the whole study, but a 2020 study in the Journal of General Internal Medicine found that 82% of people face feelings of imposter syndrome on the continuum, of course. Some would be much worse. Some would be sort of lighter. But it's something that it kind of undulates, through our life, depending on if you're a period of transition or you're getting a new job or maybe you're in a new relationship. But my goodness, it is widespread and it can be debilitating to people.
It's amazing how many people the term resonates with. And it's a whole group of sort of symptoms, right? But it's basically related to, not believing or self-doubt. And like you said, it has a lot to do with it can have to do with new roles you're taking on, new responsibilities, a new relationship, things like that. Or it could be more chronic, something that you always deal with. So that's the other end of the continuum. And that's more related to, your personal issues, where you've been.
And your imprinting, right?
And your imprinting.
What people have told you throughout your life. And my goodness, I know you've heard this ad nauseum from me, but it's like, whenever we try to go back to home plate with people, it's like there's often resistance because it feels to them like a blame game or some sort of, woo-woo kind of, we're going to start talking about my parents. Really, I'm in my 50s. But I don't think, I think a lot of people do understand this, of course, but there's a huge contingent of people that don't really understand how that manifests in their lives, how those old, when you're a young person and your brain is a big sponge and you're taking in these stimuli, and then they sort of think of it like a hard drive. It gets on the hard drive and it doesn't just
Exactly.
go away because you get
Mhm.
older. And imposter syndrome is probably, have you found that it is often linked back to that stuff?
Yes. It's been linked to early experiences with family, but also cultural messages, societal messages. And we're subject to that from childhood, from day one, to all of that. So it's not like, it's not always you had bad parents or you had something traumatic, but it's like your first 5 years of life are very formative in terms of how you feel about yourself and and how you feel about relating to people.
Yes.
So that's what it's really about, is how we relate to people and what we are projecting onto them that they might be thinking about us.
Right. And what messaging we're internalizing and how we're internalizing it. I just wrote a newsletter about failure and the fear of failure. And I told the story of how when I was a little kid, like 8, 7, I was in a girl band in my neighborhood and I was the lead singer and I was having a blast.
Fun.
And none of that noise was in my head. I, in high school, decided to audition for the school musical, and I nearly passed out on stage from fright and then shame, and then like crawling home and not wanting to talk to anybody because all of the noise had gotten in. I started believing that. So it's imposter syndrome but it's now we can figure it out. We can navigate it.
You can definitely figure it out. And I think and this is another whole aspect of it. I think it has to do with, it's a developmental thing based on our society, right? We were raised with parents that were not very emotionally attuned, but they're better than their parents. But it's getting better each generation, I hope. But there's a lot of us who don't feel like good enough because maybe our parents just really were perfectionist and very disciplinary, and they didn't we wanted to try to reach their approval, but we're never really able to.
Yes.
Because they didn't know that they were supposed to be giving you that.
They didn't have the tools, right? It's not about blaming. It's about understanding what impacted us so that we can reframe it. It's not about blaming anybody.
It's not about blaming.
It's actually the opposite, taking agency and saying, okay, this is my thing, my feeling, and I'm going to figure out how to navigate this in my world.
Yeah.
So what are some of the top strategies you guide people to use in doing that?
Yeah. So what I do is I try to have people, cognitive strategies to look at what am I feeling right now? What is my doubt about myself? And is there something going on in the environment where I am that might be triggering that right now, causing that to happen, and to try to be analytical about it. Like if you're working somewhere where it's very white collar and you came from like a blue collar type background, yet you're very smart and you're qualified to do what you do. You might look at it and say, oh, there's a lot of white collar type people and they talk a certain way and this is how I talk. And that's bringing up a lot of uncertainty. And then you have to challenge that and say, well, is it true that you don't belong here? And, I would have people write down the reasons why they think it might be true. And then the reasons why it's not true. What's the evidence that you do belong here? And once they do that, it helps them to be more in touch with that. First of all, it gets you out of the fight or flight. Right. And then it gets you more in touch with the part of you that is very capable.
So what I'm hearing you say, and I love this concept of sticking to the facts. What you're saying is identify the facts. And instead of conjecture and narrative that you're, getting down the rabbit hole. And facts may be something as simple as get your resume out and read it.
Right.
Like remind yourself what got you here.
What got you here? Or make a list. I tell people to make a list of the successes they've had.
Yeah, beautiful.
And all their strengths and the events that happened in their career that caused that, that show their strengths.
Yes.
And so whenever they're uncertain, I have them go back to that list and look at it. Maybe ask somebody that they respect, you know.
And that respects them. Like, remember that time? Like, how did you feel? Like, how did that experience affect you? Or when I gave you that advice, how did that really help you? Like, I think people get under the impression that this is a self-serving exercise. It's a self-care exercise.
It's a self-care. Yeah. Yeah. We don't live on an island, you know,
Right.
we need connections. We need feedback from people. And the other thing is when you start to remember something that was positive about who you are, your skills, it lights up that part of your brain that those neural pathways light up.
Yeah.
And so you start to feel it more.
And then you strengthen it. So neural pathways are like, you know, when you go to the gym and you lift weights and your arms get stronger.
Yeah.
When you access those neural pathways more, then they get stronger and they're more apt to fire next time.
Mm-hmm.
And you say it all the time, what fires together wires together.
Yeah.
You want to create these associations so your brain can build those pathways. Because if you beat on yourself, whether it's silently or out loud,
mm-hmm.
your brain experiences it the same way. I mean, you build, you strengthen those pathways.
Yeah.
And so it just takes practice to say, oh, stop. You know, it's like stop, drop, and roll. It's like stop and rethink this, shift out, pivot. I can do this job. Something as simple as I can do this job. I am qualified to do this job. And just keep saying it. It changes your brain.
It does. It does. There's something called stop. It's stop, take a breath, observe what you're thinking and that it's negative, and proceed with a more positive perspective, positive statement.
So say that again. Stop. The acronym for the audience is STOP. S-T-O-P. So stop is the one.
Take a breath, because you always have to take a breath.
Take a breath.
Slow down.
Yep.
Observe what's happening.
Mm-hmm.
It could be observe an interaction or observe your own inner thoughts that are negative.
Yep.
And proceed. Decide to have a more positive affirmation for yourself and continue to repeat it for yourself whenever you notice yourself.
That's great. I'm going to use that.
Like
I'm going to use that myself, in fact.
Yeah. Okay. I mean, we all need it.
We all need it. We all, like you and I talk about this stuff, work with companies, teams, individuals. We still have to use our own, we have to drink our own Kool-Aid.
Absolutely. It's like 80%. And I'm one of those, you know, and it's one of those things where you have imposter syndrome at all different times. Right. A little bit today, a lot tomorrow, you know.
It's the human condition. The other thing I think could be helpful, and something that I try to guide people to do, is to normalize failure.
Yeah.
So, you know, because they're two horns on the same goat, failure and success. So if your imposter syndrome is fueled by fear of failure, then talk about your failures. Share them with other people. What's going to happen then? Those people are going to share with you theirs, and you will normalize this discussion and destigmatize it to a certain degree. And that can attenuate some of that imposter syndrome.
Absolutely. It makes you it helps to settle that imposter syndrome down. It makes you more of a human being to other people too. And the connections get stronger, and all of that helps to get rid of the imposter syndrome.
Right. Yeah. Suzanne, what do you think about, like, I'm a big advocate of doubling down, trying to fail, failing forward, like just leaning in and just trying to fail, because all of the data tells us, I mean, it's not my opinion. The data tells us that the more you fail, the closer you are to a success, you know, like 10,000 ways not to create a light bulb, according to Thomas Edison. So I believe that can also just make this not such a big deal, because imposter syndrome is based on this assumption that they're going to find me out.
They're going to find me out. Right.
Like I have to be perfect, which, oh my goodness, perfectionism is just the bane of everyone's existence because there's no such thing. And there's actually no value in,
There really
there's
is
very
no
little value in perfection, and there's very little value in success. The value comes in the beta, the trip there.
The journey. Absolutely. I never tell people to try to fail. I'm sorry. I tell them there's no failure here. There's no failure. Go ahead, try whatever you want. And if then what you do is if something doesn't seem to work, what can you learn about it?
Right. That's a nicer way to say it.
That's how I word it.
Come on, go fail.
Just try to fail.
But yeah, so thank you for that. So yeah, it's like it's all how you.
It's all the same thing though.
Yeah, but it's like how you perceive. Perception is reality, right? So
yeah, it has to be modeled, right? Yes. So if you are ahead of a team, model it, because then other people are going to believe that you really want them to do that, to show, like have team meetings where you say, okay, what went wrong for everybody this week? Here's what went wrong with me.
You're so right. Great point you raised. Leadership. How does this integrate? When leaders feel like they have to show their shiny self all the time, you're not building trust in your team. So walk into a team meeting, like you just said, what are the headwinds and tailwinds? What worked? What didn't work last week? Who's going to go first? What was a galactic, setback? Let's talk about it. And then let me tell you about one of mine. Mm-hmm. That levels the playing field and creates such a human experience, high EQ, trust, vulnerability, all the things that everybody's reading in Harvard Business Review, but it's the actionable, items that make a difference. It's putting these things at work, not having posters on the wall with the values. It's actually living this stuff. So that's a great suggestion, and I hope people do that.
Yeah. With my clients, I always, if they're afraid of something, failure or whatever, I say, well, what's the worst thing that could happen? Let's go into it. Let's lean into it. That's what you were saying before. Yep. And figure out if that happens, then what would you do? So they end up feeling confident, like they can't really fail because they have a backup plan.
They're prepared. They're
prepared.
And these visualization exercises work.
They
work. I mean, there was a study done with basketball players, free throw shooting.
Yeah.
A group practiced free throw shooting for a year. Another group visualized. They both improved the free throw shooting within 3 percentage points of each other.
Yeah, it's because your whole body goes through, when you imagine it, your body feels like it. I mean, you may not be as tired, but your body works through what the muscles would be and what you would do, how the balance would be. And your brain thinks it's happening, even when you visualize.
Yep. So what you're suggesting is the same thing. Having people visualize. Well, then what happens? Well, then what happens? Well, then what happens? And at the end, when you pull the string enough, you're preparing yourself. Mm-hmm. So then you're ready. Of course, you can't visualize every potential, every possible outcome, but you do you do take a lot of that anxiety out of it when you do that.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Like and another thing is like one of the things that came up was with people that I spoke to this week was feeling like they were too young. People thought they were too young to have the job they did. So in that case, what I would do is say, okay, well, what are the benefits of you being younger than other people in this job? And keep that in mind. And it will totally change your whole perspective on how to react to them, how to relate to them, what you might say. Yeah. You might even just say, I know you think you're worried that I'm young, but this is why this is a good thing. And
then you're prepared, like you've thought it through. What are the gifts? What am I bringing to the table with my youth?
Right.
Or with my age, by the way, works both ways.
Exactly.
What am I bringing to the table with my with my advanced or maturity, because that can make a huge difference in skill sets and all of this.
Right. And like to try to be as confident, like find reasons why you are somebody who's offering a lot. It really has a lot of value, because if, for example, you feel like, oh, I'm too young, I have to act this different way, then what you're doing is you're playing, you're performing, and you're not being authentic. And that increases your imposter syndrome.
Yep. That's a great point. And it's not sustainable.
It's not.
You
It's
can't
exhausting.
keep that gig up. It's exhausting.
Yeah.
Yeah. That's such a great point. You can't. So, and also if you don't believe it, you're not convincing.
No.
Like
you got to try to get closer to what you believe in.
Exactly. And that's really good for young people, especially now, as they're trying to find where they fit in their career. It's like sometimes just leaning in, like you say, okay, some things could go well and some things could go poorly. Sometimes what jobs teach you, imposter syndrome or no imposter syndrome, is what you don't want to do as much as what you want to do. And that's okay. It's okay to take a job. It may not be what you want, but you learned something from it. You learned it's not what you want. You go do something else. But I think sometimes we all do it. We get very rigid in our thinking. So it's good, it's bad, it's a success, it's a failure, and it's just not. It's all
right. Yeah, not to have things be black and white is a really good strategy.
Yes. And like when I was just talking to somebody in the DE&I space, and they said these human skills need to be taught, cultivated, embraced, fostered in the workplace, and then all the more difficult discussions can take place.
Yeah.
But going into a team or a company with a DE&I initiative without the development of these fundamental skills, human skills, again, it's not a sustainable exercise. You need to build that foundation.
Yeah, you're really working. It's so much harder to get things done when people have no clue, like how to have confrontations or how to even, and how to even articulate what it is you want to say, because you think if you say one thing,
right,
somebody else is going to be upset because that's not the same opinion. But these are all human skills. We have to get comfortable with it's okay to have a different opinion than somebody else, for example.
Yeah. And just knowing how to talk about it.
Knowing how to talk.
So, we could talk about this for 3 hours, but it's almost time to end the live stream. But what I want to make sure we make time for, how do people get in touch with you and book a call or learn more about your work?
So I'm on LinkedIn, so anybody can go to my LinkedIn profile, Suzanne McColl, LPC. And there's ways to reach me there. I'm on Instagram, Suzanne McColl, LPC. I'm on all these different social media things, but I have a website. It's SuzanneMcCollLLC.com. Okay, and there's all sorts of resources. I have an imposter syndrome quiz, and one that's specifically for men and one that's more for women. So it does look a little different for men. So those are the places that I can be reached.
Okay. I encourage anybody watching to reach out to Suzanne. She's got a lot of great strategies and she's just a good human and very talented. So I want to thank you for joining me today. We'll do this again. I don't think this is going away anytime soon. Do you?
Nope.
No. So we'll do this again. In the meantime, we keep fighting the good fight.
All right. Sounds great.
Thanks,
nice talking
Suzanne.
To you, Nancy.
All right. Thanks for watching. I'll see you next time in a couple of weeks on Ask Nancy. Take care and we'll see you soon.